particular is about pinching, plucking, and pruning. So you need to get tweezers, a mirror, a bright light. Oh wait, no, sorry, wrong class. No, you don't need any of those things to do that with your plant. That's for pruning, plucking, and pinching you. Today is about the care for the plants in our garden at the stage that they're at. And this season is motoring along so quickly. So I'm going to do it in 3 little sections, and pinching, plucking, and pruning sounds like they should be the same thing, but there is a bit of difference. Actually, there's a considerable amount of difference between those 3 garden terminologies. So I'm going to start with pinching, because pinching plants is where you are actually, good and truly, giving the plant, the stem of your plant, a pinch. You can pinch it with your fingers, your fingernails. If you prefer, you can also get a small pair of scissors or pruners to do that. But at the end of it all, you are literally pinching off the top stem of your plant. And it seems kind of sort of almost silly to talk about this as a class, but when you're taught every single little piece of the gardening program, and that what you do in your garden leads you to having the ultimate yield. That's where everything we strive for. So just like a plant strives to reproduce itself, we strive in our garden to get the best yield that we can possibly get. Pinching, plucking, and pruning leads you to that. And as I go along, it'll be even more obvious. So when you pinch a plant in particular, so pinching is like where the stem comes up at the top and there's leaves, etc., etc. You're literally doing that main stem, you're pinching that off at the very tip of your plant. If a plant that you're working with has more than one main stem, then you'll pinch each of those. So what happens is you pinch the stem, and we'll, for the sake of argument, we'll say our plant today has one stem. And again, I can only lament how much more fun this would be if you were here in the garden with me. We could actually do it. That main stem of your plant. So the pinch that you're gonna do, like and most often they're in a plant, and not most often, in a plant, there's what we call new growth, which is soft and tender at the top, and the more woody growth, or the harder the stems down as it goes. You're literally working with the tender piece of that plant. So once your plant has gotten about to where they are now, because most of the plants are up nicely, putting flowers on. I don't pinch flowers off unless it is on an herb. So if you want your herbs to bush out, you will pinch those stems. Just to let you know that pinching time, that plant probably has its name because you have to pinch every single one of those stems if you want your time for plants to bush out. You're taking that pinch at the top of the stem. So like I said, if it's one stem, you pinch that. If there's many stems, like with a thyme plant, you're going to be pinching more than one. That pinch that you're doing to your plants is literally causing the plant to say, wait a second, something bad just happened. Someone took our hat. Now what do? We'll trick them. We'll put 2 hats on. So it will literally turn that one stem into 2. And then if you do that all over the plant, then you're going to have that many more places where branches, leaves, flowers, and then finally fruit can come out. You want to, what will happen is that stem will grow from where the leaf node that's down below that will come out. So if you look at a plant, and I should have grabbed a piece of basil because it's the easiest one to do. If one of the girls shows up, I'll have them grab it. So the why is always, people like, nobody wants to pinch their plant. There is a particular plant that you never pinch the center of. Never. You never take the leaves from the center of it. And that's your kale. Because if you take that center of your kale, it won't grow any more leaves. It might get the odd one here or there, but it won't get any bigger, won't get any more. That's the exception to the rule. I was trying to think of what else there was, but that's pretty much the only one. Everything else that has the tendency to go to flower, for example, basil, that's a good one to talk about. you pinch the top of your basil. So the basil grows up and has a few branches. If you pinch the tips of those stems that are coming off, then it will force another stem to come out at the end. So you have two, and that plant will automatically fill out. The main reason that you pinch a plant is to force it to become fuller. So the plants that need pinching, this is a good rule of thumb, the plants that need pinching most often are the ones where you're going to use the leaves. So basil, thyme, oregano, you want to pinch those flowers off before they come. You want the flowers to stay off. Eventually, towards a little further in the season, you'll let them come back on, but for now, you're pinching them off so that you can keep harvesting those herbs. I don't have a problem harvesting thyme or oregano with the flowers on it. If it's gone to flower already, that's perfectly fine. Cut them, hang them. Where you cut them, it'll start a whole new plant. Basil, however, if you let it, it's not really a flower per se, but it looks like a tight cluster of leaves at the top of the plant. That tight cluster of leaves is the basil's flower. So if you let those happen, and then they will elongate, and then it will actually get flower, like petals on it. If you let that happen all over the plant, it will actually stop producing leaves. So that basil plant is essentially kaput. The plants have a job. Every plant has one job. We've talked about this a few times. It's to grow and then produce a flower and then a fruit and then seeds. Like herbs, their fruit is their leaves. So once it gets the flower, it's done its job because the seeds are in that flower. So their job is to reproduce themselves. Our job is to eat them. So we all have our job to do. So we'll just pinch the top of them, and then we'll do our job for a long time, then eventually let them do their job. So if you want more leaves, like for example, like the thyme, any of the herbs are a really good one to talk about pinching, is to do that pinch at the top. As you pinch the top stem, the plant becomes fuller, makes more leaves. You get a big pile of leaves, you put them in a bowl, make sure they're clean, put them in a blender, you add a little oil, a little pine nuts, get a little pesto going on, throw some pot. Oh no, I got sidetracked. Sorry, I got talking about basil and got carried away. So how to pinch? Most of the time, it's a natural thing. Just think about your kid misbehaving. Just give him a little pinch. You're doing the same thing to your plant. You're growing too tall and gangly. So it's pretty easy to pinch it with your fingers or like fingernails if you have them long enough. But you can also, like I said earlier, use a pair of scissors. What you want to make sure is you don't leave a long stick sticking out. So if the branches come out and you are pinching this one, pinch it down far enough that there's a piece of stem that will divide out, but not a long stick. Because that long piece, if you leave that, it will shrivel. And every time a plant has to do something, take care of that shriveled end, take care of any part of itself, it uses energy to do that. So you want to cut it down, make it as easy as possible for it to get more stems where the next set of leaves would have been. So you want to pinch as close to above the leaf nodes as possible, because you want it to force it to branch out, and because every plant would be just as happy to grow tall and skinny, have enough leaves to get enough sunlight to make food for themselves, make their flower, make their fruit, and do their job. They don't care if we have pesto. They don't care if we get to make a caprese salad. None of that occurs to them. It's happy to just do its job and grow tall, make the leaves, and do it, which is fine. It's welcome to do that at the end of the season. We very carefully work hard for them. We feed them and weed around them and give them a drink every day and stir up their soil so that they can get some nice air to their roots. We do all of that. In return, they should feed us. I think it's just a fair trade. So, mosquitoes are getting me because it's raining. So the pinching of plants, again, like I said, it's almost always related to the plants that you are going to use the leaves. So that's the pinching section. So, 20 after already. Okay, so plucking. Let's go on to plucking. Everybody's plucked something. Pluck the hair, pluck an egg from under a chicken. So plucking, even though it sounds like it should be the same thing, it's not. Plucking is mostly about the yellowed or brown leaves that are around the bottom of your plant. And some plants, not all, but some plants will actually try and help these leaves to recover. So if they have to spread themselves thin to try and recover leaves, if it's that particular kind of plant, you're actually doing them a bigger service by taking off those leaves at the bottom. The amount of energy that a plant will use to repair a cut in the stem or a leaf that's starting to turn, it's actually, it goes on for a certain point, and the plant will then say, sorry, you're a lost cause. And what it will do then in reverse, rather than pushing food to that leaf, it will actually draw from that leaf so that that leaf gets more yellow, curls up, gets brown, and will fall off, because that's how the plant takes care of itself. Because even though we do lots for our plants, and it's kind of cool how being a gardener is helping, the plants really do know how to take care of themselves, and they'll tell you that. If they're getting too much water, their leaves will yellow at the bottom. If they're not getting enough water or a consistent amount of water, if you water them and then forget and then water them, you'll be able to tell that that's what you're doing, because the tips of the leaves of that plant will get brown. But if they are if they're getting too much water, the leaves at the bottom of the plant will yellow. It'll increase exponentially if you allow the soil to dry out completely and produce those yellow leaves, and then soak it to death. Because what will happen is those yellow leaves will turn brown right away, and more leaves will yellow. So you want that, remember that whole water and weed and feed thing. You want to be consistent with your water. But let's talk about the plucking. So the main reason to pluck those is for most people is because the plant looks nicer. I mean, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging the aesthetics of our environment. So yes, it does look better, but there's always an actual, behind every beauty moment, there's a reason for it. So not just making our plants look better, removing those yellow leaves and brown leaves literally reduces the chance of you getting bugs and critters. Hang on a second, guys. I feel like I'm racing through this because I'm going to run out of time. The decaying and dying leaves at the bottom, it actually attracts bugs. They're attracted to that decaying spot. Because if you think of where a log or a pile of leaves sits on the ground, how as it sits there and starts to decay, how underneath it just fills up with this whole village of critters and bugs and stuff. And that's the same thing that will happen on your plant. It's almost like putting out a welcome mat and an invitation, like, yoo-hoo, got an open hotel room here in the form of a couple of yellow leaves. Come on in, move in. And the plant quite often can't take enough food away from that leaf to make it fall off quick enough, and the critters will come. So your job then is to pluck. This is why it's called plucking, because you reach in, you grab hold of the leaf, and you pluck. If you grab hold of the leaf and it doesn't immediately let go of it. Get scissors and cut it off, because if you're plucking leaves and one sticks a bit and you kind of jerk it off, quite often what will happen is you create a little tear where that leaf was attached to the stem. Plants can survive almost anything except for you torturing their stem. That is the main track for them to get their food back and forth, their water back and forth, all of that kind of stuff, the sugar that has to go in and out. So what will happen sometimes is you'll pluck, and if it sticks and you pull at it, it'll make a little spot. It'll create a scab. If it creates a scab on there, the plant won't reproduce a leaf there, because if you pluck it and you're like, oh no, my plant looks all wobbly and wonky and ugly looking. There's a big bare spot in here. That's okay, because nature abhors a void. So if there's an open spot, the plant will say, okay, space, let's fill it in, new branch, new leaves, let's do it. And if it's, as long as it's not at the end of the season, it will fill that spot in. So pinching, plucking, and pruning. So some people, for garden plants especially, to them pruning is talking about trees. Most often when you talk about pruning in your garden, you're literally talking about, it's called suckering. So what happens, a pruning, well, pruning itself I could talk about for a week or more, maybe even more. So a week's full of classes, we could talk about pruning, all the things that you could do for pruning. We have a short amount of time, so I'm going to give you the strong, hardy basics for your garden and the plants you have right now. Because we're focusing on vegetables, we'll talk about, let's do tomatoes, because they're the easiest one to talk about. First of all, why do plants produce these extra leaves, these suckers as they're called? So when a plant starts to grow, doesn't matter what kind of plant it is, and this is why plants come, vegetables come under, quite often under, as strongly under the carbohydrate list as they do the fruit and vegetable list. It's because there's a lot of sugar in them. And it's a natural sugar, it's a good sugar, it's good for you. Oh, excuse me. But that sugar is what makes the plants produce those suckers. So the plant, remember, wants itself to do one thing, reproduce. So how does it reproduce? Makes the best plant it can. Tomatoes in particular like to make a lot of leaves. They're kind of a show-offy plant. Oh, look at me, I'm just so pretty and green and I've got all these leaves. Tell you a secret. Tomato plants, literally, as long as you don't harm this stem, need only 7 leaves. 7. On a whole plant, they've done it, experiments, 7 leaves on one tomato plant, and it will have a full, generous harvest of tomatoes. It has to have just enough leaves to feed everything. So it doesn't need all those leaves, obviously. And just like I was saying earlier about how taking the leaves off so that the plant doesn't continue to, there's going to be times when you are plucking at your tomatoes and your other garden plants, as well as suckering or pruning them. So on a tomato, if my arm is the stem and my thumb is the branch, a sucker or a part that needs to be pruned will grow out of here. So there'll be a branch growing out of here that'll get leaves on it. Sometimes it will even get flowers. But those suckers, they're not very useful. They'll get lots of leaves. Sometimes they'll get flowers. They may even get a tomato, but the tomatoes are not very big. Quite often not as tasty, and there'll be something wrong with them. The skin will be hard, or a sucker doesn't grow very good. It's exactly what the name says. It's the big, it tricks you. It suckers you into thinking it's a fabulous part of the plant, and it's not. So you want to take those little, if you look at your tomato plant, you're going to see them. It's like it just sprouted out of the crotch of that little area. The main stem, the branch, and it shoots out here. And if you aren't looking for them, it just looks like your tomato plant is this fabulous abundance of green. But if you look on them, like I was looking at the San Marzanos out in the garden this morning, and one plant had 7 of those. So I took them all off, and yeah, it thinned out the plant, but it thinned it out in a good way, because what will happen now is that the plant will be able to utilize more of the sugar that I was talking about, the energy, to go up and down and produce a better flower, a better fruit, and a bigger one. So those suckers literally are taking away from your plant, and consequently then taking away from you. So those are easy to take out. You can't really use scissors because you don't want to leave even a little bit of it, because they'll continue to try and grow. And then we've talked about how that causes the plant to have to shrivel it up and spend time on it. You just grab it at the base and twist. Just prune it right out of there. The ultimate goal for your tomato plant is for you to have all of those suckers off, all of the leaves that are like kind of curly and ugly at the bottom taken off. Tomatoes in particular are prone to critters getting on. Think of how many times you've plucked a tomato, picked it up, and ooh, that's so pretty, look at it, and turn it around and it's all chewed up from bugs. So you don't want anything that creates a space for it to get in there and chew on your fruit. So what to prune? Like I said, this is a really long topic, and I want to give you guys time to ask questions. And as Arlie is recording this to see how it's going to work, I also don't want to go more than half an hour. Honestly, how many of you would watch a video about what I'm talking about for more than half an hour? By now I'd be like, this woman doesn't, Michelle, oh, seriously? Would you? For real? Wow. Me, I'm like, oh, people are going to get tired of this. Oh, I guess. You guys are so funny. Well, maybe I need to talk to them about, maybe my portion of it needs to be a little longer, and then we can add like 15 or 20 minutes on for questions at the end of that. We'll talk about that. So the biggest reason for pruning, Donna, you guys are too amazing. I'm not gonna lie. After like 20 minutes, I'm that kid. I'm that ADHD kid. It's like, okay, this is enough. I gotta go. No more. I can't listen no more. That'd be me. Booking her out the door, coming back. I mean, I do that anyway. Okay, so the main reason for our pinching, plucking, and pruning is, at the end of the day, the ultimate harvest. That's what we're looking for. But in the same breath, as gardeners, it's our job to take care of our babies that we've nurtured from seed and had them grow until they're big. We want them to do their job the best they can. And in order for them to do their job, since we are cultivating them, is for us to do our job. And that means doing all of these things. I'm not going to lie. When you haven't done it, if you haven't pinched, if you haven't plucked things, if you haven't pruned things, the first time you go out in your garden and have to do it, it's going to take a bit of time. So allow some time to do it, but it is important. I've seen tomatoes that produce without being pruned, and tomato plants that have been pruned. I'll tell you what, I did that experiment with a group of 5-year-olds. We did it in a classroom. The one that we pruned, we probably got, I'm going to say like 20 or 25, it might have been, no, 23 tomatoes off of it, decent sized tomatoes. The one we didn't prune, we got 11. So there's a vast difference between what you're going to get by doing a little bit of work. And I know there's lots to do in the garden. Watering takes up a lot of time. But as you're watering, as you're walking along, it's easy to reach down, pluck off some of those yellow leaves. It's easy to reach down and do a bit of suckering as you're going along. It's not something you have to go into the garden, stop, say, okay, today I'm just going to pluck. Today is all about plucking. Nobody gets a drink, just gets plucked. So all of those things can be done in and out at the same time. So that's pretty much it for pinching, plucking, and pruning. Does anyone have any particular questions? Oh, sorry, I made myself laugh. Yes, no? Okay, Arlie, that's the chatty part. So now we get to talk. Sometimes we talk about the topic at hand and sometimes we don't.